Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Mastering fundraising endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. This podcast will share stories, tips, and guidance on the most important elements of fundraising. If you want to earn an advanced degree in fundraising, this is the podcast for you. Mastering Fundraising is a collaboration between Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership and the 5-Tool Fundraiser, two leaders in providing relevant and expert content to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. Without further delay, let's jump into the current episode. Please join me in welcoming your host for today, Chris Looney.
Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a show for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. My name is Chris Looney. I have the good fortune to be your host for this deep dive into fundraising. Our show endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. Today, pleased to welcome Bill Littlejohn, one of the most respected and successful fundraisers of all time. The topic of the conversation today is about some of those fundamentals of fundraising around acquisition, retention, and growing the dollars contributed by individual donors. Real essential stuff for fundraisers of all tenures. So welcome to the show, Bill. We're glad to be able to learn from you today, to take advantage of all that you've learned in a very distinguished and successful career in fundraising and in nonprofit leadership, which I love to combine those two. There's fundraising and there's nonprofit leadership. And when you are an accomplished fundraiser, you are absolutely a nonprofit leader. So all of us, though, would love to know a little bit about your leadership journey. So if you don't mind, please tell us a little bit about that. When did it all start? And tell us the places that you've been.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. And it's great to be with you virtually and with all of you out there who are going to be watching this. It's always enjoy sharing with colleagues, sharing the journey, sharing experience. I think we learn so much from each other. I mean, we can read books and do things, but in the end of the day, I think in philanthropy, our journeys have been influenced by the impact that our colleagues have on us and we have upon them. So it's always great to share that. Yeah, it has been quite a journey. I graduated from the University of Virginia a number of years ago with a degree in economics, and if you said to me then I'd be raising money for a hospital system in San Diego 40 years later, I would have thought, you're crazy or something, or I had drank too much at the fraternity parties or something like that, because never thought that would happen. But when I look back now, I think it was a journey that I guess I was destined for. And everything from I was active in community activities in college and high school, things like that. But it was, circumstance, I guess, that happened. I did a few things when I first got out of college. I did some political campaign work. I'd grown up in the Washington, D.C. area and done all that kind of field work and walking precincts and raising money and doing things like that. And I ended up responding to an ad and taking a job at the American Cancer Society in California as an assistant director of development. And I ended up spending 9 years there. And so that was sort of surprising. You start, thinking, oh, you're just taking a job, you're in your early 20s and
right.
What happens, right? And but what it was, and it goes to sort of the topic we'll talk about today, is it was a big national healthcare organization and lots of fundraising, but it was a lot of those fundamentals. And it was great for me. I was able to do a number of different jobs there, learn a lot. They had a lot of great training programs and did everything from, the days of going residential door-to-door type of activities, or, the jail and bail and raising money and golf tournaments, and certainly lots of direct response and direct mail before the days of email and all of that. And it was building a successful philanthropic program, both locally and then across the state. But what I would point to in that, I did spend 9 years there, is that I had increasing opportunities to both grow my generalist skills in fundraising and philanthropy, but then also to specialize in certain things like direct response, and got very involved in that, in direct mail and the computerization and all of that. and prospect and acquisition mail and that and donor renewal, which we talk about, the acquisition, renewal, and grow, and how we did that, especially in a big program like that. So I think that's really important. I've learned that is that you end up, you should be sort of good at everything, but really good at something. And I think
Perfect.
that's, be a generalist, but then be able to specialize. And I think more and more today that requires that in our philanthropic world, because we have a lot more sophistication and development activity. So and then I hooked up with a guy from the University of Virginia who had a consulting firm that did campaigns and audits and studies and things like that. We were far apart in age, but we kind of connected up as alumni. And he had a small firm based in San Francisco, the Greenwood Company, that did a lot of campaign work in healthcare, and ended up spending 10 years there. And that was really, that was incredible work. One, in that I talk about the three characteristics for people in our profession.
Okay.
And we have the three things about the fundamentals of fundraising.
Yeah.
I'll start with the three characteristics I think
Perfect.
for all of us need to have. And first one is people skills. And that's not like just being friendly. It's being able to present and engage people, whatever type of donor or prospect they might be. The articulation skills to make a presentation, sort of like sales, but at the end of the day, and interact and respond. Well, I really gleaned those during the consulting when I did lots of interviews. Chris, you know that world where you interview people for studies. And
such an important skill.
You had to learn active listening and be able to, and then be able to go back and report to a board what you really heard and be able to sort of sift through all of that. So that kind of people skills, and then interacting and interviewing, it just really hones that in so well. So in the end of the day, you can work with a committee or a board, or you can do that when just by doing that function. So that was the first one. Second one was kind of the work ethic. When you're a consultant, you got a project, you got to do it. And it was the idea was the aspect of, I think it today true, you put the Nike poster on the wall, just go do it. You may have a plan for a fundraising activity, but you've got to go do it. You've got to have the ethic to go do it. And that's why it's a campaign. It's a journey. It's a dynamic you go through. And the last one is attention to detail, is that you choreograph that fundraising activity, and you really only get one chance to do it right. So you really have to put all of the details together, whether it's in the best acquisition, direct mail piece or email you can do, all the way up to training a volunteer group for being involved in solicitations, whatever it might be, or crafting a proposal. So those three characteristics, I think I also were able to hone, especially during the consulting days when you had a very specific project or activity, and we were, quote, I don't say the experts, but we were the guides more so than anything. And I remember thinking that people thought, and I probably saw this, Chris, when you came in as a consultant, oh, you're going to raise the money for us.
Sure.
you're gonna, oh, you have the secret list of who to go to and all that. I said, no, we're going to teach you and train you how, and this is your campaign. And I remember one of my best experiences was doing a campaign for a small hospital in the Central Valley of California, really up in the gold country. And it was an old county hospital, and they were building a new one from a system had taken it over. It was actually Sutter Amador Hospital. And they had never done anything big. It was a very small community of county of 30,000 people. And we came in and told them you could raise $1 million, and they thought we were crazy.
Right.
And we worked together on the campaign. It was great. We raised about 1.4 million. And that we had a sort of celebration at the end. And they said, you guys were right in that we thought you were crazy that you couldn't. I said, no, you did this. And we just sort of helped you and showed you what to do. So in the end of the day is that, so I really honed my skills in that aspect of, kind of train the trainer and, and not just sort of say, give them, here's a book, what to do, let's do it together. And then, of course, Sharp became one of my clients, Sharp Healthcare in San Diego. And I did a big study for them. And the CEO said, why don't you come work for us? We like what you told us. And I thought about it for a while. And I had a couple of young kids and didn't think I would want to do as much travel. And here I am 23 years later. But you know what it was at Sharp was they basically said, do what you told us that we needed to do
Right.
in the study you gave to us. Is that you gave us an honest, review. We told them they couldn't raise all the money, and there were issues they had to get through. He said, well, you seem to know that, and that's what really been great, is that the embracing of the leadership
That
at
is
Sharp
great.
from the very beginning to say, okay, tell us or show us or work with us or guide us to what we need to do, not just you come in, Bill, and go over there and raise the money. So I think that's really what's kept me at Sharp more than, I've been here 23 years and include my consulting, it's like 27 years now, is that it's been an organization that's been incredibly willing to embrace philanthropy and create its culture, not just because it's important and needed, but it's understood as a great community asset, and the value proposition of philanthropy is embraced here versus, oh, it's nice to have, or we're a nonprofit, or we need the money, we can't, it was the idea that we can, our future can be embraced by the fact of philanthropy is going to be a part of that. So, that's sort of, so again, a 42-year journey, but only 3 places where I've actually worked, 3 employees.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna put a point out to people, wherever you are in your career, stay a while.
Yeah. Good.
That it obviously, people change, it's great, and promote and move jobs. But I even look at that and saying, people say, well, how are you doing on certain things like physician development at Sharp? And, how long did it take you? And I said, well, I've been here 23 years. It's taken 23 years. And it's a never ending journey. And so, and I think that then also Sharp has gotten a lot of value out of my staying around for a while because of relationships
absolutely.
and all of that. So if you think about that, I've had this journey of, the ACS, which was great, a learning experience, a lot of training, and kind of the generalist kind of fundraising, the small dollar stuff, then consulting, be able to really specialize and get really good at sort of some of those characteristics, and then just be able to put it to work at a place that was really willing to embrace it, which I give great credit to Sharp too. So, but yeah, that's. But I also then. The other thing I'll mention, and knowing people like you, Chris, is that I got very involved in the Association for Healthcare Philanthropy. I became the board chair. I think the collegial dynamic that I've had, both from a mentoring and mentee collaboration, discussing stuff, conferences, of course, and training programs, has been incredibly valuable. That I've learned so much from myself, but I've learned from so many others, and sort of the best practice sharing, but also just having that, I can pick up the phone or send an email and say, we got a situation here. You guys might be, and I think that dynamic, because even we talked about this in sort of our world, one of my great colleagues I work with, he said, our programs are like snowflakes, no two are alike. We still do fundraising. Everybody, fundraising is fundraising. I even say this, is that fundraising isn't complicated, but in a place like Sharp Healthcare, it's pretty complex. So just think about that. If those of you think about even a small organization can be complex in its leaders, like you mentioned, leadership, its strategy, its expectations of philanthropy. Raising money, asking people for money, sure, there's some complexity with certain giving types, but in the end of the day, you acquire, you retain, you grow. But doing it in a bigger organization or a complex organization requires, some good thought and learning and practice sharing, and really doing what's going to be most effective. So in the end, and that's what we've really worked at here too, is saying we still do the fundamentals and we still have targets to acquire and retain, but we know we do it in a very complex environment. But if we have the support and engagement of the institution, that makes a difference. I just want to say before we go to the next question or kind of move on, I remember when I first got to Sharp, and this is something I could recommend to people. I went to the CEO and said, I'd like to have 20 minutes, a half an hour to go to the system board of directors, the leadership board, not just the foundation. I'd like to go and make a presentation. So, I said, oh, it'd be great. And I said, here are kind of the fundamentals. And what I said to him, I said, now look, I'm not, I don't have the Rolodex of people. I'm not even from San Diego. So you can't expect me to go get friends of people to come on board. I said, Sharp Healthcare, this organization creates the environment in which the foundation or the fundraising team will raise money. The more you act and embrace that, and not so much give all the money, but even, willing to take my call, be engaged in that, the more success we'll have. Because this institute, people give for causes, but they give to people. And so the more that the leadership embraces that and stands up like the CEO, like a president of university, this better success we'll have. So we've raised a lot of money, and I give credit. Sure, I could take a little bit of credit, but I give it to this organization who said, yes, we put a value proposition on this, and therefore the people as well, and not just the hired hand. And so and I said, I think back, I said, that meeting early on in the first few months of my, tenure sort of helped set that stage. And sure, there's been ups and downs and bumps along the way, but I encourage everyone, if you can, in whatever leadership group, the idea is that it's the institutional dynamic of philanthropy versus fundraising. I'm the fundraising expert, but Sharp has a culture of philanthropy, which is very different from the aspect of just the functional dynamic. So that's sort of been one of those key learnings for me, and and again, where I've been able to have a great career, which I will conclude here at Sharp in the next few years.
Amazing. Well, what was your favorite leadership journey? What was your favorite role? And it's interesting because I know you were also the chair of AHP for a number of years too. So it wouldn't even have to be that professional, paid professional role. It could be a volunteer leadership role. What's been your favorite?
That's a really great. I've done some great campaign work over the years, working with boards and groups, or even board retreats where I've gone and then a year later heard back and say, yeah, we implemented some of your stuff. It was great. Or the disappointment, like, oh boy, something changed. And remember that you know this, they left the study on the shelf.
Yeah.
And that you almost get disappointed at times. I think I could look at it a couple ways. Is that, there's been obviously several projects like that one I mentioned up in Amador County, where here was this little hospital that just, it might have been $1 billion for them. They were so proud of what they did. And I was able to kind of sort of stand at the back and say, I helped them do that. And to this day, I can sort of, feel proud of that. I think the other thing is that I have done a lot of mentoring over the years. I've been an HP mentor, but just others, because I've taught a lot, and I've just done things. And I've really enjoyed the aspect of mentoring people over the years and see their career both flourish or their programs become more successful. And again, it's the aspect that it wasn't so much, telling them what to do. It was just sharing the practices. And that, again, the aspect that, I got mentoring too from people and collegial relationships. So, and then the other thing, so that's, both, campaigns I've done with just great success and be able to kind of stand back from afar, the individual mentoring. But then I thought about this too, is that we've done a lot of great things here at Sharp. And people say, what are you most proud of? I said, it's a couple of things. One, we've raised a lot of money, had big impact, and it's great milestones. But also said, I can pick up the phone, or I can call or send an email to virtually any physician at Sharp Healthcare, and they'll take my call, or they'll return my call, or they'll be willing to engage. And I thought, that's a big accomplishment. Here's people in a completely different profession, very stressed out, very busy.
Right.
But it's not that it's Bill Littlejohn. It's they respect the role that I have. They've seen the impact of philanthropy. We've had about 1/3 of our board directors are active and retired physicians. They're incredibly engaged, and and what that means is that they see the value, but they're also willing to engage their colleagues. And I thought that's one of those cultural and career dynamics you had, where they respect the person, me, but they respect the function, versus I don't have time for you, or whatever it might be, and not being offensive, but I thought, that's something I can look back on and say, gosh, that 2 decades of just cultivating those relationships. And going back to my people skills of when I would engage the doctors and not just being the fundraiser to talk about how we're going to raise money or could they get us some patients to talk to. Let's talk about the future of your practice. Let's understand what are the issues and challenges and where we might be able to develop things better and getting a bill. So I just think, things like that. So there isn't one thing that stands out. I mean, there's some great, ribbon cuttings and all those things, but I think I've been proud to see the growth of some of my colleagues as mentors, the successes in individual projects, and the appreciation from, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is that it's so funny when you're a consultant, they think, oh, you're a suit from afar, and
Sure.
they have all this different impression. You don't know you don't know who we're really like, and all of that, and we're different here. And then at the end of the project, they're pretty appreciative of what you did. And so I've enjoyed that. And even it's funny, I did a retreat for a board at a foundation where I did a campaign like 25 years ago, and went back up, and there were still a few people around. And it was wonderful to, and I said, congratulations on what you've accomplished, but there's still more to do. And I think it was great that they could look back and say, yeah, that was successful, and that now we're in a different place. I thought that was kind of fun to kind of go back in time and to, they didn't forget about me, which was kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, those are huge building blocks that you created
they're
for
part of
them.
that's a part of a career journey. And it's like, sure, you could put it on the resume that would raise this amount of money, but it's even that is that you engage with a group of people who embraced what you shared with them, and then they went off and did it, and said, then they went and raised the money.
You actually gave them the confidence to know that they
Exactly.
could do this themselves too, right? That,
Right.
oh, wow, we can do more than we thought we could.
Sure.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Well, you've had ample time to hone sort of your nonprofit leadership philosophy. And it's an interesting one, I'm sure, because it has this element of fundraising in it, because that's where you've been so focused. But it's been broad. I mean, you've been responsible for leading teams, hiring and firing. You've been responsible for developing strategic vision, managing up, managing big teams, and also obviously finding ways to raise the big bucks, finding ways to meet big audacious goals and all of that. So how would you describe your leadership philosophy?
Right. It's like you sometimes talk about, when you get a group of people together, you want to be the dumbest person in the room. You want to really get great people to work with, whether they're board members or others or volunteers.
Yeah, good.
That, and then, I said back when I talked about, I said, I've used this slide before, with in my presentation on the one thing there's a book there's a great book of quotes and stuff on just says philanthropy. And then there's over here, there's a fundraising for dummies. And I put that up with a, do not enter between the two of them. The idea that, fundraising, anybody can do it. You just get the Fundraising for Dummies book. And over here is philanthropy, which is 2,000 years of stories and quotes and, just powerful and scripture and everything else. I said, they're different. And I think we get hung up that, I'm a director of fundraising, versus I'm the senior officer for philanthropy at Sharp. And so and that's the thing is that, and I said they're different. And philanthropy means the love of mankind, but it means this culture of generosity and the value proposition of philanthropy and its investment versus it's just a fundraising function. You're a charity, go out and raise money, or we need $1 million to meet the budget, whatever, it's just, and then we're just functional people. And that's really where I've really, especially in the healthcare philanthropy space, and where, there's been challenges and people get sidelined, and that the leadership of the institution doesn't value the philanthropic piece. Either it's not enough money, or it's like, it's nice to have, or it's, it helps us a little bit here, versus what we look at from the value proposition. So that's where I think I've really worked on my leadership development with both staff and boards and executives, and talking about the investment value of philanthropy, the institutional value, and that therefore we are agents or facilitators of creating either a culture and elevating philanthropy through successful fundraising strategies and techniques, the big three: acquisition, retain, and grow, or plan gifts, or whatever it is, or whatever it might be. All the details you go into, and digital and all that. There's lots of that, and there's much more complexity with that now too. But ultimately, I really honed in on, and that's the thing, is that it's our philanthropic program. It's not a fundraising program. We do fundraising. That's if we facilitate that. And I told that to the boards too. I said, look, I could also change my title to be, I'm the Chief Investment Officer at Sharp, because that's what we get. People don't just give us money because we need it. We certainly do need it. We have a vision for the future, and they invest in the future of not just Sharp, but of San Diego or their health or whatever it might be. And so that became, and so I've really focused on that, and in all of my, and it's, I've been overseas and done this in Germany and France and Australia. It's all about, at the end of the day, of institutional culture, and therefore I'm a leader of helping to create that, as well as I'm a leader of doing really good best practice in fundraising functions.
Awesome. Wow. That's so good. Well, and that's a great segue too, because we want to jump into a conversation today about the fundamentals. And you've hit on it a couple of times, that acquisition of donors, retention of donors, and growing the dollars contributed by individual donors. So let's dig into those. But before we sort of start, why, in your mind, are these fundamentals so essential to good fundraising?
Yeah, a great point. And it's really timely because, boy, how many articles and now books about the donor crisis,
right,
or the giving crisis? It's all out there, and we're experiencing it too. And so part of it is demographic and societal and things like that, that's a whole nother kind of session discussed. But in the end of the day, it's like back what I said, is that they give to four causes, but they give to people, and people ask. And the end of the day is, and the money they're giving is then being, the people who get it go out and do something with it and spend it on other people and to do good and make things happen. And so, the aspect is that, and right, and still, even when you look at the report on giving and the Giving USA, 85% of all the money given is by people. It's by individuals through both gifts, cash gifts and pledges, but also even bequests. And even a donor advised fund is still an individual fund held by an institution, but it's my money, and they might hold it now. So, in the end of the day, get a big foundation to give you money, or get a company or whatever. That's great. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to individuals. And the idea, and the other aspect is that you have to have, be an organization that is attracted to individuals who believe in your cause, and will ultimately, support that. And I've done a lot of research about that, is that, back 40 years ago, in 1982, back from the report on giving, there were about 300,000 nonprofit organizations that were, that were in the survey, that were, 501c3s. Now there's 1.8 or 9 million. That's like a 6 times increase.
Right.
Well, the population of the United States has not increased by 6x. It's only gone up by, I don't know, 20% or something like that. Yeah, or 30%. So we've had this explosion of organizations, and God love them, but it doesn't mean they're all the best organizations to do that work. So they're after everyone, and so that's, in the end of the day, is that everyone. So the competition, of course, not just for dollars, but for donors, has become acute. And so, and of course, now with the explosion of the internet and email and connectivity and all of that, social media, all those types of things. And so it brings up that, in the end of the day, you have to create the value proposition with individuals to support you. I mean, it's and too oftentimes organizations now, they look, major gifts are great, but they look for one big donor. And it's amazing how even the pyramid of giving in a campaign has changed to where it used to be that, you've done that. We used to say you get your top, your half your money from your top 10 gifts. Now you might get it from your top 2 because the donors aren't as available. But what it means is that also that acquisition of, getting someone to give to you is a timely and most inexpensive and not a big return for a period of time process. So people look to doing, quick fix. Let's do a special event to raise money, and that's great. And then let's do it again, kind of thing. Where when I ran the direct mail program at the American Cancer Society, we used to do about 6 million pieces of mail, and just in California, 4 million of those were acquisition. But even those days, we were hoping to get a rate of 2% return.
2%, yeah.
Now you're barely getting 1 or even a half. We see it even though we're going back to our patients, because the world has changed. And one of the big changings of that, and you've seen this in the report on giving, and we're seeing less than half the households are giving in the country, but also this big drop off of religious giving. And to me, and it wasn't big gifts. It was giving every week, and it was in person, and it was putting the money and that was a teaching dynamic for philanthropy too, for giving. Good
point.
Now, it isn't about religion, and this was for every religion, but the idea was, half of the money given in 1982 was giving to religious causes. So when you take out a big chunk of that, it didn't all get replaced. Because what happened is churches raised a lot of money because they had a congregation of people. They acquired them through whatever means. They asked them every week, and they retained them through their retention programs. So there's huge amounts. I mean, it was my parents. I mean, I watched my parents put a $10 or $20 check in an envelope, and then they put it in the plate. And then if they missed a week, they took the 2 envelopes and whatever they did, they caught up. And so
muscle memory.
But the end of the day is that organizations back then, their big acquisition was either in person, going door to door, or direct mail became absolutely enormous in the 70s and 80s and all of that. And people built big constituent files of small donors to sort of feed their organizations. And so, but you take some of that away, you also take kind of the culture of, giving was a good thing. And so, and all that religious giving has not all been replaced. And so in the end of the day, but getting back to it is that, okay, you got to acquire a donor. Chris, if I want you to give to Sharp, I've got to cultivate you and educate you and ask you to give. Well, I have to do that thousands of times. I have to do it thousands of times. And now, of course, we're doing it in direct response in email and social media and even on television. It's really interesting. You see all these organizations advertising 24 hours a day, and they're not asking for $100. They're asking for $11 a month.
Mm-hmm, right.
Religious giving, they're asking for a monthly contribution. That's retention. So now you're working in both acquisition and retention at the same time.
Interesting.
And then, of course, you want to grow them if you develop the relationships. So, it does get down to kind of a math deal. So I would say is that, okay, if I want to acquire 100 donors, how many can I keep next year? Can I keep at least half of them? So what kind of stewardship and cultivation and education and impact sharing so I can retain that? And then I can retain, if I do retain half of those, how many years will it take before 2 or 3 of those will become major gift prospects?
And that's the grow part.
Right. That's the fundamental. And it's like, you could do special events. It can be either an acquisition strategy or a retention strategy. Sometimes it's a major gift strategy. A planned gift is just a gift. It's not, it's a future gift, but it's still a gift. And so and I would say that the biggest challenge, you saw this in campaigns when you did studies, is did you have enough people in the pipeline? Did you have enough people to go to ask for money? Either people who were well qualified or not. So in the end of the day, moves management that we all kind of learned is a real dynamic. And the fact is that, and there's no secret, kind of formula or no secret strategy that we've learned. We do lots of email and social media that hasn't bumped up our rates. And, there's only one ice bucket challenge every, generation of some viral activity that goes on. And now so it gets down to is saying that, okay, we want to raise, and I even said this, is that you could write a fundraising plan without any dollar amounts on it and say, here's what we want to do. We want to acquire 100 donors at an average gift of $100.
Okay.
Well, what does that get? We do that, we get $1,000, or is that 10,000? That's $10,000. Now, I'd like to keep 50% of those next year. So I'm going to go back but I'm going to do two things next year. I'm going to do another acquisition of 100, and I'm going to keep 50. So now but now the 50 I kept, some of those will go away in the third year. You know about lapsing and all of that. So you can run all this and say, okay, that's great. So I'm going to get X amount of the 50 in the next year. And then of the 50 I keep in the second year, I'd like to start maybe pull off 10 of those to cultivate for major gifts. And they get into the pipeline. And then of those 10, there might be 3 or 4 who go on and make a major gift.
Right.
I want to be doing that. So you want to be doing all 3 things at the same time. You want to acquire, retain, and grow. So what do you do to acquire? Great education, a great way to deliver the message, to make the ask, whether it's in person, virtually, by mail, whatever it is. The idea that you all that stuff you do to say, Chris, will you give us $100 to help
at
us?
any level, really,
Any
right?
level.
At any level.
Okay, now I got to both thank you at the end of that, right? Now I got to think about, well, they always talk about this too, is that the second gift is the most important gift.
Interesting.
It's easy to get one gift, like, okay, we had an earthquake and we're gonna need to get money in to bring. Oh, great, I'll help you. It's the second gift. So what do I do in stewardship and future cultivation and impact sharing of what we did with your first gift, so that it gives you confidence to make a second gift. And then that's the retention. And the grow is out there. Oh, Chris has given now 3 years in a row. And, we found out he's been pretty successful and he's shown an interest. So we're going to bring Chris in to meet with the president. And we're going to do him a tour, whatever it might be. So in the end of the day, if I write this plan out and say, if I get 100 new donors, I keep 50 and then I can do an equal sign at the bottom and say that will raise us $38,500 versus I'm going to put a $38,500 goal and then figure out how to get there. Too often times we say we want to raise $1 million when we should be saying, I want to get 100 new donors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love it.
So in the end of the day is that, so even in the big, it's like, it's like the university we go to. Once you're out of school, can you join the alumni association? In the end of the day, but one of the biggest challenges is, well, do you have 100 prospects or the ability to acquire 100 donors? And the idea being, it shouldn't just be friends of board members or others. It would be the idea being that this is a community organization of which the community, and if you don't, even if you try hard, it might mean that, well, going back to, do we really need 2 million nonprofit organizations a lot of them doing the same type of work? Now we get into the aspect of that, well, I deserve to get all this money. I'm like, you might, but if you're in the capitalist society, if you don't do business, you go out of business.
That's right.
And so, no offense, so that's where it gets back to your case for support, the impact of what your institution does, your organization does. And God love them, everything is good, but it doesn't mean you need to have, 8 organizations. There's more than 13,000 nonprofits in San Diego. Now, so if every one of those contacted me in the course of it would take me years just to go through. And so the question becomes, now it gets to the point of donor choice and relationship. And the reality is that they're not going to give to every organization. So we've even gone down the line saying, we'd like to have our contributors have Sharp be among their top 3 to 5. We don't want it to be first. The church can be first.
Yeah, that's great.
But in the end, what we have to be good at, this is where it gets to fundraising being good at, is that, okay, what strategies and plans do we have to acquire relationships?
Good.
What's our strategy then to retain them and to create loyalty out of them? The churches raise so much money, not because they asked once for $100. They ask every week in person. They created an expectation. You came, you got value out of this from a sermon and interaction, and you gave back because you wanted to keep doing that. So they raised the most money, $20 at a time. And they used envelopes, and now they do checking deduction. So it still raises a lot of money, still number one, but it's now getting into, and that's where there's great opportunity, I think, in this sort of digital transformation to create.
Importantly, I think it's necessary to highlight the fact that if you're not acquiring new donors all the time, you're really jeopardizing the future of the organization, right? I mean, fundamentally, attrition will get the better of you if you're not continually feeding.
Either they go to someplace else or they die or whatever. And how many times you did studies and things, people talked about donor fatigue.
Right.
They went back to the same people over and over again. Like, well, there are, and that became easy to do. And that's also why, even for organizations like not that are churches, and that's what you're seeing, what's happening on TV, is the strategy of recurring giving.
Yeah, it's a brilliant strategy.
Yeah, and the idea being that, we have a program that our partners, which is $1,000 a year contribution, a membership, but you can do $85 a month, and you do it online from your checking account. Boom, boom, boom. So the idea. This is where we have to, and I think we're getting there. But it's amazing how fundraising programs were built on people writing checks and sending out pieces of mail. Well, checks are going away, and that for those who, again, everything you see on TV, the ads for Tunnel to Towers and Wounded Warriors and the Shriners and everybody else, it's a QR code, or it's a URL, and it's for $11 or $19 a month. It's not for a one-time gift, because what happens is
very manageable.
They don't have to go back and ask you again to renew. It's automatic. So in the end of the day, we have to then. Here's another and we're doing a big technology roadmap and all of this other work, because the digital transformation is everywhere. And I liken that and say, and the fact is that that digital journey can be even more personalized than getting stuff in the mail, or even a phone call. I mean, and you create loyalty. I mean, and I've said this, when I travel, I don't talk to, I get my boarding pass, I get upgrades, I can check into my room, I can do all this stuff. Not that I don't like people, but it facilitated my travel journey much better. In the end of the day, so we can send to someone a renewal, or even and then we can send them a customized, a personalized piece. We can connect them we can do all these types of things. And so, but now it's that. So now acquisition, where it was for so long, was direct mail and all of that, and kind of now it's not just email, but it's social media, but it's also apps and connectivity. But you still have to do the same thing of deliver a message, deliver education, deliver some rationale for supporting the organization, be able to separate yourself out. And this is especially for people who don't know about you. So it becomes more challenging to do that. When in the old days, is that only the big organizations could afford to do direct mail, because it was very expensive. Now anybody can do email, And so this is why but you're also getting this sort of donor fatigue and people just ignoring all of it. And so, but it gets back to, you still got to, you're exactly right, Chris. If you don't acquire, and you don't keep acquiring, because you will always have attrition. There's no way you're going to retain everybody.
Right.
It just happens that way. And that's what happens, is that then the pipeline or major gift pool looks pretty thin 5 years out from now. And that's
Yeah.
what, when you talk about, this is not, you want to do everything all the time, but you can't do your grow piece until you've done pretty well in your acquisition and retention.
Exactly.
You go get a prospect list and go raise a whole bunch of money, or you can, and so you're a one-trick pony, right? So we've lost some of that, and again, so back to it's the fundamental. There's only 3 ways you raise money. You acquire a donor with a gift, you keep them, and then you move them, and you want to be. So in the end, that's why I've been a huge proponent on strategic philanthropy versus just annual, or even a campaign. Is that what are you doing today that will impact your program 5 years from now? You'll have a better prospect pool or pipeline. And so, but if you don't do that second piece well, cultivation, you won't retain, and they'll drop off. Then you drop, and all that work you did on an acquisition is all for naught.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways that I think it's important to understand the grow piece.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned the opportunity to peel a few prospective donors off
Mm-hmm.
for targeting at a larger level, right? So your donor group is naturally going to self-select their interest, and then they'll, by capacity, have some that you can ask for larger gifts.
Right.
So in the ideal world, they're continuing to make their annual gift, and then they're also finding some special projects to give significant gifts to. But additionally, it's fascinating because I think there's a failure among a lot of fundraisers, a lot of organizations, to continually move donors up in their giving over time. And so it's very typical to have someone that's given $100 for 20 years in a row.
Right.
And that's only because that was their pattern and
Right.
they love the organization. But had there been stewardship, had there
Right.
been a relationship, it's quite possible that 100 could have become 500, could have become 1,000, could have become more on an annual basis. And it's interesting that the grow piece has to be both about the major gift opportunities, but also about moving people up the ladder.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, right?
Up the ladder of relationship and also then giving. Right. It's that, oh, look, they're a highly rated prospect. Let's go ask them for $1 million. Well, maybe lightning might strike, but more than likely not. It might be, no, would you join the $1,000 group? And then we might be sooner rather than later to cultivate the bigger gift because we know the capacity exists. But the idea that just because they've been in our hospital and they're highly rated, it's going to turn into that happens, once every 10,000. You're exactly right. So and I have also, surveys have always shown that when they ask people why they didn't give again to an organization, said, well, they never told me what they did with the money in the first place. Or they came back and just asked for more. I was like, well, you got to give again. It's a year later. Like, well, did my gift have any impact? So we put a huge effort into stewardship. And stewardship, it used to be just like, the Donor Recognition Society or whatever. No, stewardship is about stewarding both the money and the people, and that the responsibility you have for both. And the idea, so most of our stewardship is about impact reporting of what our biggest goal and target for us is not how much we're going to raise this year. It's what we're going to distribute back for technology and programs and people and capital activities. That's the number Sharp likes. That's the money we give back to them. So I say to people like, well, you talk about all this money you're raising. What exactly did you do with it? And can you demonstrate that to the donor so they can feel good about their next gift, and especially even a bigger gift? So right, in the end of the day, is that we got hung up with, putting a name on the wall or in a newsletter because they gave whatever it was or in some society, but do they really know what the impact? Or we put in our newsletter how much we raised for some a golf event, but we really did tell the story, and so actually we even opened every one of our board meetings, rather than reading the minutes, it's a story of inspired giving, and it's about
Right.
a gift. It's about a doctor's, the impact. It's about a piece of technology. It's about, a patient relationship. And that sets the tone that we can say, this is why we're here. Is the end of the day, it's more about impacting, healthcare versus, how much we're going to raise. You're exactly right. And so in the end of the day, so you think about, you got to have a really good acquisition strategy, because it's a tough hill to climb with 2 million organizations and direct response and all this kind of stuff that you don't have clear kind of communication channels. You do, but it's busy and noisy. Then you've got to have a really good stewardship, impact, and retention strategy, because that second gift becomes critically important.
Yep.
And then the grow has to be, what is our strategy with this relationship? Not just when can we go get $1 million? Exactly. Where are they in their life cycle of relationship and giving? And so again, you've got to be good at all three of those, because if you don't acquire, you're not going to retain. There's not enough to. And if you don't retain well, you're not going to have that pipeline. And then people look for some kind of fix to where, we'll just go get the big gift, and hopefully we'll get 1 or 2 big gifts.
That's it.
To bail us out and get there. And then, or let's go back to the board or whatever. And it's like, gosh, how many times are you going to have to go to the well on this, or the same foundation? When, they're out there. I always say, the money is out there. It's still in people's pockets though. But so all that goes to, then we have to get, so again, in the end of the day, if we understand that, we're going to create fundraising strategies that are going to be focused on acquisition retention, not just let's raise $20 million. Now, we might say, we need to raise $20 million because we know that's the big project initiative. And then we're going to back it around with the idea that we're going to need, like the gift chart, but we're going to be before the gift chart and the pyramid or whatever it is. You got to have that base that you even start to work from. So, and now in a society that it's changed its kind of perceptions of philanthropy and aspect, and not that it's a less generous, but like I said, is that this donor crisis, when people say, well, it's that, okay, what is, how did we get to a donor crisis today? What did we cause it? did the fundraising world cause this donor crisis by having, 2 million organizations that just do nothing but send out emails and put ads on TV and just incessantly, just beat our doors down because everybody can do it? Or is it changing? Some of it's that, and some of it's also the changing demographics, that you have less, religious giving, which kind of changes some of the, people, because, religious giving has lots to do with the aspect of giving back, tithing, and all of those kinds of social things and dynamics of
Sure.
which, and this isn't like, well, religion good or bad. This is just the reality of it. And that's the thing, is that you go back in the Lapham's Quarterly, I have that book on philanthropy. It's a lot of it is from scriptures from all types of religions about how you kind of give back, because that's you've been blessed to do that. So yeah, there's a lot of activities, but the idea is that you can still be successful if you, again, focus on that's what the fundamentals are, but you also then facilitate strategies that that take advantage of the dynamic, is that making digital engagement successful and more personalized than getting a letter in the mail that takes 2 weeks to put together. So
Yeah.
and that's so we have a big strategic plan at Sharp, 5 years, and we lay out big strategies. But within that are still and then one of the things that I recommend people do, we do a full donor file analysis every year. So we look at the entire file of our donors, and we consider an active donor as somebody who's given at least one gift in the last 3 years.
Okay, good.
So we look at the active file, we look at the inactive, which hasn't, the lapsing rates. We look at people who have given 2 consecutive years in a row. We look
Oh,
at
I'm glad you're pause on that for a second, because I'm glad. My question was, and this is one of the last questions I wanted to approach you with. on this topic, it is evaluating the numbers and the metrics and
Yep.
being able to track acquisition rates, retention rates, growth rates, because it seems as though everyone is very comfortable with counting dollars, year over
Right.
year growth in dollars, but not paying attention to how many donors did we have, how many repeat donors did we, so talk to me
Yeah,
as you
so we
talk
do
about the strategic
we do
plan.
two things. Is that we do and I'm happy to share some of these with people if they're interested. That we do a full monthly dashboard, which has all the donor information, but it has all the gift processing. It has all of the direct response. It has just acquisition rates, renewal rates for donors. We do open rates and click throughs for our digital strategies. We look at our web traffic and all those visits and everything, and then look at all of our moves. We report out identification, cultivation, solicitation. Look at all the rates for all of that. So we have this full dashboard report, and then we say is that the activity report is just as important, if not more so, than the dollar report. So
Perfect.
even I share it with the board and say, now look, well, the difference between this year and last year is we got $10 million gift. So it's the numbers of gifts that we get. And I said, even this yesterday at our board meeting, I said, we're still in the red in some of our gift processing. Damn, if we still can't, it's hard to get the nose up. This donor crisis is real for us. Now we've gotten a lot of money, but I'm nervous about, 5 years from now. So we do that, but then we do a full complete review of the donor file. We got 100,000 of them, including people who are deceased that we keep on for legacy purposes. But we look at consecutive year giving. We look at people whose highest gift was this year. So if they made their largest cumulative gift in this current year, that's probably because of the campaign. We look at lapsing rates, that the first year, second year, third year lapsing. So and then we're tracking it now over time. So we've now done this for 5 or so years. So we can see the trending of the donor file, of how it's behaving, so to speak.
Right.
And then that gets us to say, okay, let's improve our retention rate. Let's increase the number of consecutive year donors versus let's just raise X amount of money. And so we use the dashboard as well to set targets for solicitations, for open rates, or for, I said, it's not about how much money that direct response did, but what was the response rate and what was the average gift. So you could set a target for, improving response, or improving the average, upping the ante, improving the average gift size. So yes, and I know that's a lot of work to do, but we have fundraising systems like we use Raiser's Edge. The ability to do that is incredibly important because, like I said, it's not so much the dollars, it's the activity. In the end of the day, we implement fundraising strategies that are activity based. We ask people, we cultivate them, we move them, we send out an email. And it includes a solicitation, and then we get the money is whatever is going to happen as a result of that. And so the idea being is you want to not just do enough of those, but you want to use data. Absolutely, Chris. Use data to to improve. I always said this, and people, we talked about best practice was a great theme for many years, and best practice was using empirical data to figure out what works well and do more of it and keep at it. But it was also the flip side, to also use that empirical data to figure out that what didn't work and stop doing it. And fundraising has kind of a nasty habit of not stopping stuff that they should, whether it's a special event that is way too expensive to put on, but you can't offend the volunteers, to some mailing or some way. Well, we've done a Mother's Day mailing every year. I'm like, well, if it's not working, don't do it. And so we've gotten to do the same thing over and over again in our fundraising plans, regardless of the results, because we probably haven't done enough good metric analysis or KPIs to really understand if it is successful or not, or we can benchmark it against something else. So yes, you absolutely, because it's an activity game with acquisition, retention, and growth, it's a metric game. It's a numbers game.
It is, right.
In the campaign, we used to put up one thing in a campaign, said how many people have been assigned, how many have been cultivated, how many have been asked, how many have said no. We need to know that. And then we always say, look, the gap was always between the number we have cultivated and the number we have asked. We had a great cultivation event, but we haven't gone out and asked these people to. And so, in the end, it was and they said the campaign will be successful because you fill out enough of that chart. It's not because the case was the greatest thing in the world. It could be, but you shared that case, right? And that's where, again, there's more sophistication today with things like direct response, with direct email and social media, and how effectively you're using that and things like that. So, and the idea being that when you think about it, sending out an email, they've got to first open the email, they got to click on it and then go to the website. Then they may have to make another click here and then finally make a gift. Whereas in direct mail, they either throw it out or they send a gift back. So, and then can we move from better open rates to click-throughs? And so, so we're constantly using that because we know those are tools that we use in which to, meet one of those three standards. So in the end, no matter how big and sophisticated, we have all kinds of incredible gift dynamics and opportunities, we still have to do those fundamentals and do them well.
Yeah. Well, it's so true that what gets measured gets movement. And I love your point about the idea that some things need to be continued and some things need to be eliminated based on that analysis. So I think that we've covered an amazing amount of territory today. And I think the audience needs to probably sit back and consider all of this, maybe listen to it again, just to catch all of the amazing guidance and advice that you've offered to them. Bill, thank you for being such a force for good. Thank you for being part of our conversation today, sharing all of this amazing, helpful information.
And if you want to end up doing a class or something where we actually could, and use some real data and information, if you want to do a class sometime through Fulcrum and for people, we'd be happy to do that.
Oh, I'd love that.
That's the thing, is sharing with colleagues. We've learned so much from people, and the aspect of sharing that, and in whatever format, and that because we do it with ourselves. I mean, that's the other thing. We have to be, we're transparent and accountable with boards and everything else, but we really have to be self-critical ourselves and say, look, this didn't really work. Let's either fine tune it, and we've done a lot of that. We know Sharp is an organization for high reliability, and we do things like Lean Six Sigma. So we're very fortunate we're an organization that has sort of CQI, constant quality improvement. So we want to improve the quality of our philanthropic programs, not just do more of them.
Well, we'll take you up on that offer
that'd
for
be great.
sure. You're such a great teacher and mentor to thousands, and want to take advantage of all of those opportunities you provide to those of us in the industry to learn and grow from you. And your impact has been extraordinary, and I hope that this interview will continue to bless a lot of future nonprofit leaders for many years to come.
Yeah, always happy to share. It's great working with you. We've known each other a long time, and we're all in the same journey, so to speak, with lots of different sort of paths we take. But ultimately, I say, at the end of the day, it's about elevating philanthropy, not just an organization in our communities. And the idea being that in our profession, if we can, elevate philanthropy among our communities, I think we can check off we've done a pretty good job.
Amen to that. Yeah. And with that, we'll sign off. This has been Mastering Fundraising with Chris Looney and our special guest, Bill Littlejohn. Join us for our next episode of Mastering Fundraising, coming to you very soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for joining this episode of Mastering Fundraising. We hope the conversation was helpful and invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast for more conversations with extraordinary nonprofit and fundraising leaders. To learn more about Fulcrum nonprofit leadership, please visit us on the web at fulcrumleader.com. To learn more about the 5-Tool Fundraiser, please visit us at 5toolfundraiser.com. We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Thank you for the important work you do to make our world stronger. We look forward to welcoming you back during a future podcast. In the meantime, take care and be well.